I don't know how to say this without sounding like a lunatic, but my wife gave away our baby while I was at work and tried to make it look like I agreed to it. Let me rewind. Her name is Ivy. We met in college, did the long-distance thing after graduation, and married 5 years ago. Our lives weren't flashy. We lived in a modest townhome, worked stable jobs, and tried for years to get pregnant. She had 2 miscarriages. 1 ectopic. That alone put us through more grief than I thought possible. So when she got pregnant with Ruby, our daughter, it felt like a miracle. We were scared, cautious, but we were finally hopeful again. The pregnancy was rough. Bed rest at 25 weeks, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia near the end. Ruby came out tiny but healthy. Ivy changed. The first week home, I thought it was the baby blues. Then it got darker. She stopped sleeping, refused to hold Ruby sometimes. Other times she'd stare at her for hours with this blank expression I can't unsee. I begged her to get help. She said no, she was handling it. But I knew she wasn't. Here's where the weird stuff started. About a month after Ruby was born, Ivy started going to a yoga class twice a week. I was relieved. I thought it meant she was clawing her way out of the fog. I took over full-time dad duty those nights and honestly loved it. Just Ruby and me, bottles and bedtime stories, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. But one night I noticed Ivy's yoga mat was in the hall closet. I asked her about it. She didn't miss a beat. Said she borrowed one from the studio. Fine. Didn't seem like a big deal. Until I noticed her phone was always off during these yoga nights. No texts. No calls. Just D&D for 3 hours straight. Then I found the receipt. Folded in a pair of jeans she never wears. Dated 2 weeks ago. From an out-of-town hotel. And it wasn't just a charge, it was a charge for room service. For 2 people. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. I waited. I waited for the next yoga night. And I followed her. She drove 45 minutes out of town. Parked at a plain brick building that looked like a law office. I sat in the car across the street for 2 hours. When she came out, she wasn't alone. A man I'd never seen before walked her to her car. No kiss. No hug. But something about their body language was off. That night, I told her I wanted to come to yoga with her next week. She froze. Then she said she'd been lying. She wasn't going to yoga. She'd been seeing a therapist. She said she was ashamed, didn't want me to know, and was sorry. And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. Until 2 weeks later, when Ruby was just about 3 months old, I came home to an empty crib. And a note that said, "Please don't hate me. I couldn't do it. I gave her to someone who can. You'll understand one day." I thought she was kidnapped. I called the cops. Reported a missing child. But Ivy had legally signed away our child. And not to strangers. To someone I knew. Ivy didn't come home that night. The police were the first to suggest I check with any relative she might have confided in. That felt like a slap in the face, like they were implying I somehow lost my child due to carelessness. But I did what they asked. Called her parents. Her sister. Her old roommate. Even her childhood friend she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Nothing. They didn't even know Ivy was struggling, let alone planning to give our daughter away. Her sister cried so hard on the phone I thought she might pass out. Said Ivy hadn't mentioned anything, and they'd been planning to visit in 2 weeks to meet Ruby. So no, it wasn't them. Ruby was gone. No signs of forced entry. No baby clothes taken. No bottles. No formula. Nothing but a bassinet so empty it looked like a grave. The police put out a bolo. Opened a custodial interference file. I wasn't even sure what that meant, but apparently, because Ivy was Ruby's legal mother, it wasn't kidnapping. Even if I hadn't agreed. Even if it felt like someone cut my body in half while I was at work. Then I remembered the building. The man she walked out with. I drove there the next morning. It wasn't a therapist's office. It was a private legal firm. I Googled the name. One of the top-rated adoption attorneys in the state. Family law. Custody battles. Open and closed adoptions. My blood ran cold. I called. Asked for a consultation. Said I was considering placing a child. They gave me an appointment the next day. When I walked in, the receptionist smiled warmly. Said, "Is this for Ruby?" I almost collapsed. I didn't confirm. Just asked to speak with the lawyer directly. He came out wearing the same blue tie he had on the night I followed Ivy. Balding. Early 50s. Polished. And when he saw me, his smile faded like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Carson," he said. "This is unexpected. How do you know my name?" I asked. He didn't answer. I told him I wanted to know where my daughter was. He said he couldn't discuss another client's file. I said I'd get a court order. He said it wouldn't help. Ivy had full custodial rights at the time of the adoption. She signed. They had paperwork. She listed me as uninvolved. I thought I might hit him. Instead, I sat there and said, if you don't tell me where my daughter is, I'm going to the press, and I will bury this firm. That got his attention. He leaned in, lowered his voice, and said the name. The adoptive parent is Peter Hammond. I hadn't heard that name in over 5 years, but I knew it. Peter Hammond was Ivy's old boss, a partner at the ad agency where she interned in college. Married, back then. He and his wife had a kid in Ivy's yearbook. A few photos of them at company parties. I never met him until our wedding. He showed up with a +1 Ivy had never introduced. Said he was an old minner. Sat at our table. Toasted to fresh starts and old connections. He held my daughter now. I drove straight to the address the lawyer let slip in a stray comment. I still don't know if he meant to say it, or if I just scared the truth out of him. It was a house in the suburbs. Clean. White shutters. Big yard. And Ruby's car seat was on the porch. I didn't knock. I pounded. The door opened to a man who didn't look shocked. Didn't look confused. He looked prepared. Mr. Carson, he said, calm as ice. You need to leave. Where's my daughter? I asked, my voice shaking. She's asleep. And you have no legal claim here. My fist clenched. My teeth were grinding so hard I thought they'd crack. You adopted my daughter. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. And you think I'm just going to walk away? Peter didn't answer. Instead, a woman stepped into view behind him. Not Ivy. His new wife. Blonde. Polished. In yoga pants. Holding Ruby like she belonged there. And then she said it. We've bonded with her. This is her home now. I swear I don't even remember driving home. I think I screamed most of the way. Called the cops. Called 3 lawyers. Called my parents, who drove in from 4 hours away the next morning and found me sitting on the nursery floor, holding the last onesie she ever wore in our house. Ivy still hadn't come home. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call. Blocked number. It was her. She was crying. Said she was safe. Said she'd had a mental break and made a mistake. Said Ruby was okay and the adoptive parents were wealthy and stable. That she'd done it because she didn't think I'd stay with her. That she thought I resented the baby. That I was working too much and not sleeping, and one night I said I couldn't take it anymore. I remembered that night. I was exhausted. I think I said something like, I don't know how much more of this we can take. Apparently, she took that as permission to give our child away. Ivy, I said, voice low. Where are you? She hung up. And I lost it. We found her 5 days later. In a motel 2 towns over. Drunk. Alone. She left rehab 2 months before giving birth. I hadn't even known she relapsed. She tried to say she wanted to do the right thing. Said the adoption could be reversed. Said she hadn't signed the final papers. She was lying. The adoption was finalized. She'd signed them 6 weeks ago. She'd been planning this the whole time. Her yoga sessions were meetings with the lawyer, Peter, and the adoption agency. And here's the twist. The document said I was unknown, as if I didn't exist. Let me start by saying this. I am not a criminal. I pay my taxes. I stop at red lights. I return my shopping cart. But when the law tells you your baby daughter belongs to a man who once toasted your wedding, and your wife calls you from a motel she's been drinking herself into oblivion in, and no one, not the cops, not your lawyer, not the courts, can give you a straight answer on how to fix it, you stop caring about what's legal. You start caring about what's right. So I took her back. It happened on a Thursday. Peter was working late. I knew because I followed him for 3 days straight and tracked his routine. His wife took Ruby for walks around the neighborhood at 6 p.m. sharp. Always the same stroller. Always the same route. I waited at the bend by the park. When she passed, I stepped in front of her. She froze. Looked down at Ruby. Then up at me. Please, I said. She's mine. I'm calling the police, she said, and reached for her phone. I didn't touch her. Didn't scream. Didn't do anything but kneel down and reach into the stroller. Ruby looked up at me, and she smiled. That smile broke me. It healed me. It gave me the courage to do something I never thought I'd be capable of. I picked her up, and I ran. Yes, I know how that sounds. Yes, I know what people will say. But I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't steal her. You can't steal what's already yours. That night, I didn't go home. Ivy's parents helped me disappear. They were just as shocked and angry at what she'd done. They'd already started legal proceedings to try to challenge the adoption, but we were losing time fast. They had a cabin upstate. I stayed there. No internet. No phone. Just me, Ruby, and a bag full of diapers. The first night, she didn't sleep. She cried and cried, and I think she missed the routine, the bottle timing, the sounds of that other house. But the second night, she fell asleep in my arms. And the third night, she said her first sound that almost sounded like duh. I cried harder than I ever have in my life. But it didn't last. 4 days later, the sheriff knocked on the cabin door. They'd traced Ivy's dad's credit card. He'd bought a generator for the cabin. Idiot move. We all make them when we're scared. They didn't arrest me. Not yet. They served me. Court order. Emergency hearing. The Hammonds filed for custody and claimed I was a danger to the child. Ivy. She'd checked into rehab. Voluntarily. Her lawyer argued that she was taking responsibility and trying to heal. Mine argued that she committed premeditated fraud and had no legal right to unilaterally sign away our child. But the adoption had already been finalized. Reversing it? Next to impossible. Unless I could prove that the adoption papers were fraudulent. That Ivy knew I was the father. That she intentionally listed me as unknown to avoid needing my signature. That's when the war began. We dug. My lawyer, Ivy's sister, even an old friend of mine who works in digital forensics. And we found something. Ivy's browser history. She'd Googled how to give up baby without dad's permission 3 months before the birth. Then again 6 weeks after Ruby was born. She'd made burner email accounts. Contacted multiple agencies before settling on Hammond's firm. She'd used her maiden name, lied on health records, and even paid for a P.O. box to avoid listing our real home address. She'd done everything she could to erase me from the equation. We submitted everything to the court. Then we played our last card. A paternity test. Filed independently. Rushed. Verified by 2 labs. 99.997% match. Ruby was biologically mine, and the court had no choice but to reopen the adoption. Peter and his wife lawyered up hard. They painted me as unstable. Said I abducted Ruby. That I was violent, controlling, emotionally abusive. That Ivy was a victim of my manipulation and the adoption was her only way out. They even brought up my college-era DUI from 10 years ago. But I had something they didn't. The truth. I brought Ivy to court. She was sober, nervous, crying, but honest. She admitted everything. She admitted the deception, the lying, the deliberate erasure of me from our daughter's life. She said she thought she was giving Ruby a better life. She broke down when the judge asked why she never told me. Said she thought I wouldn't fight. The judge asked her if she now believed I deserved to be in my daughter's life. Ivy looked at me, then at Ruby, then said the first real words I'd heard from her in months. Yes, he's a better father than I'll ever be a mother. The judge ordered a stay on the adoption. Ruby was returned to my custody, temporarily. The Hammonds still had visitation rights. The adoption was in review. A final decision would be made after a 6-week evaluation period. So I took Ruby home, to the house we bought for her, to the nursery I never took down. And for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt hope. But I wasn't ready for what came next. Peter didn't back down. He hired private investigators. He dug into my finances, my past, my everything. And then, he sued for full custody. Not just visitation. Not shared parenting. Full parental rights. I thought getting Ruby back, even temporarily, was the end of the nightmare. But it was just the start. Peter Hammond didn't just want visitation. He wanted to erase me. Completely. Just like Ivy tried to do. His new court filing said I was unfit, unstable, and dangerously reactive. He claimed I had kidnapped Ruby. Claimed she cried when she saw me. Claimed my presence triggered emotional regression. It was all bullshit. But in court, bullshit that's well-dressed and well-funded can win. And Peter? He had money. The kind of money that buys lawyers who don't blink. Who know how to dig into every crevice of your life and twist it into something vile. Exhibit A, my DUI. 10 years ago. College. 1 beer too many. Pulled over 2 blocks from my dorm. No accident. No injuries. Still, on paper, it's a criminal offense. Exhibit B, my abduction. They called it that every chance they got. Ignored the context. Ignored the recordings. Ignored Ivy's confession. To them, I was a man who took a child from her legal guardians in the street. Exhibit C, my mental health. They found a prescription I filled in 2019 for anti-anxiety meds. It was after I got laid off and had a panic attack. I took the meds for 3 months. But in their court documents, history of untreated anxiety, potential for emotional instability. You'd think I was a damn serial killer. But what hit hardest? They started interviewing my friends, neighbors, even my exes. One of them, Kelly, from 4 years ago, testified that I had control issues, that I liked things my way. She left out the part where she cheated on me. I found out and ended it. Didn't matter. The seed was planted. And Ivy? She went silent. After her testimony in court, she checked back into rehab and ghosted the entire process. Her lawyer kept filing extensions, claiming fragile mental state. It protected her from perjury charges. And it meant I took all the heat. I was the only parent fighting. Alone. My lawyer warned me the judge was starting to lean Hammond's way. Joint custody is slipping, she said. You need a win. Something undeniable. So I gave her one. The burner emails. Remember the fake accounts Ivy used to contact adoption agencies? We subpoenaed them. Traced the IPs. 2 were sent from Peter Hammond's office. And not just from it. From his assistant's email. We presented it in court. It was a bombshell. The email showed Peter had been involved long before Ivy gave birth. He knew I existed. He knew she was hiding me. One email even said, "He'll never know. She's scared of him." That's enough for the agency to move forward. My lawyer stood up and asked the judge one question. Is this a man trying to rescue a child, or a man who orchestrated her theft? Peter's lawyer lost it. Called it a smear campaign. Called the emails fabricated. But the court had already verified them. It changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't on trial anymore. Peter was. The judge ordered an emergency injunction. Hammond's visitation was revoked immediately. Ruby stayed with me full-time. A court-appointed evaluator was assigned to observe our home. And Peter? Well, his downfall hadn't even started yet. Because just 1 week later, his wife left him. She showed up at my lawyer's office with a folder. Inside, more emails, voice recordings, photos, and a written statement that said, I can't be part of this anymore. I didn't know how far he went, but I know now. She revealed that Peter and Ivy had a relationship. Not romantic, transactional. He promised to help her disappear, pay for her rehab, keep her secrets. In return, she'd give him what his wife couldn't. A daughter. Ruby. He manipulated Ivy, abused his legal connections, and tried to buy a child. My child. I submitted everything to the court. The judge's response was swift and brutal. Adoption annulled. All parental rights of the Hammonds revoked. Peter charged with conspiracy and fraud. My lawyer said she hadn't seen a judge slam the gavel that hard in years. Peter's lawyer walked out mid-hearing. But I didn't feel relief. Not yet. Because Ivy still hadn't answered for what she did. And the judge had one more question. Do you want to pursue criminal charges against the mother? I said I needed time. Because as much as I hated her, as much as I wanted to burn the world for what she did, Ruby would grow up one day, and she'd ask where her mother was. I didn't want the answer to be in prison, because I put her there. So no, I didn't press charges, but I did file for full custody. And when Ivy finally emerged, weeks later, trembling, sober, and quiet, she didn't fight me. She signed the papers, voluntarily terminated her rights. All she asked was to hold Ruby once. She kissed her forehead, whispered something I couldn't hear, then walked out of her life. I've never seen her again. It's been 4 years since I last saw Ivy. 4 years since the court gave me full custody. Since Peter Hammond was stripped of every legal right he thought he could buy. Since Ivy kissed Ruby's forehead, whispered a goodbye, and disappeared into whatever version of penance she chose for herself. 4 years of healing, of building something real, of putting one foot in front of the other every single day, and being the best father I could be, even when I was terrified I didn't know what I was doing. Ruby's 6 now. Smart as hell. Beautiful. Kind. Loves animals and drawing, and insists on brushing her teeth for exactly 2 minutes while I hum the Mission Impossible theme. She asks questions, of course, about her mom. I tell her what I can, that her mother loved her, but she was sick, that it wasn't Ruby's fault, that some people need help before they can come back, if they ever do. And for 4 years, there was silence. Until last week. It was a Thursday. I was home early from work. Ruby was at her friend Maisie's for a sleepover. Someone knocked on the door. 3 soft taps. The kind you knock when you're afraid of what comes next. When I opened it, I didn't recognize her right away. Shorter hair. Thinner. More lines on her face. Eyes that looked older than they had any right to. Ivy. She was holding a manila envelope. And shaking. I didn't invite her in. Just stood there. Waiting. She looked down at the envelope, then up at me. "It's not what you think," she said. I didn't answer. She held the envelope out. "I'm not here to take anything. I need you to see this. Then I'll go." I took it. She turned and walked down the driveway before I could say anything. I watched her get into a beat-up sedan and drive away without looking back. I closed the door. Opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A letter. A set of therapy documents. A journal. The letter was handwritten. It started with, "If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to face the worst thing I've ever done." She didn't make excuses. Didn't beg for forgiveness. She admitted it all. The fear. The shame. The manipulation. How Peter convinced her that I'd never fight. That I'd never even want Ruby. How his promises of saving her sounded like a lifeline when she was drowning in postpartum psychosis. She said she thinks about Ruby every day. And me. That every birthday, she lights a candle. And she knows that doesn't mean anything. That it doesn't fix a damn thing. But it's what she does. The therapy documents showed she'd been in treatment for the last 3 years. Diagnosed. Medicated. Consistent. No relapses. Letters from her doctors. Evaluations. She hadn't come to beg for custody. She came to close the circle. The journal broke me. It was written like letters to Ruby. Every few pages started with, "Hi, baby," or "Dear love," or "You'll never read this, but I need to say it anyway." Pages and pages of grief, rage, healing. Of her describing the guilt like a backpack full of stones she'd carry for the rest of her life. Of how she saw Ruby and every baby at the park. How she once followed a stranger for 3 blocks because the toddler smelled like Ruby used to. She never once blamed me. She only blamed herself. That night, I sat on the floor of Ruby's room, journal in my lap, and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I took her back. Because I hated Ivy for what she did. But a small part of me. A very small part. Still remembered the girl I met in college. The girl who used to hold my hand under restaurant tables and cry watching Pixar movies. The girl who once whispered, "I want to be a mom more than anything." She became a mom, then broke into pieces. And now, maybe she's picking them up. 2 days later, I wrote her back. I don't know what made me do it. I just did. I told her I got the envelope. Told her Ruby is doing great. Smart. Healthy. Beautiful. I didn't invite her in. But I didn't slam the door either. I left it cracked. Just enough for someday. Maybe. Last night, Ruby asked about her mom again. I said, she loved you, but she had some big things to fix in herself. Ruby looked at me, thoughtful, then said, "If she's fixing them, can I meet her someday?" I didn't have an answer. So I said the only honest thing I could. "Maybe. If she keeps fixing. If you want to." And Ruby nodded. Then hugged me. And said, "It's okay, Daddy. I have you."